Listen, come closer, let me tell you a story about a young, but poor girl who went to the city to work as a nanny in a rich house. She never knows that the child she was paid to take care of was the same baby she thought she lost years back. Before we continue, please hit the subscribe button now. You don't want to miss what happens next. Ada was only 20 years old, and yet the world had already taken so much from her. Her mother had died when she was just a child, leaving her with a sick father and a life full of struggle. Every morning, Ada would wake up before the sun, her small hands trembling as she tried to carry water from the well, thinking, I have to survive. I have to help Baba. Her village was quiet, but not peaceful. The winds whispered through the trees, and the dust rose in small clouds as children ran barefoot across the dirt paths. Ada had grown used to this life, hard, harsh, unforgiving, but something inside her longed for more. Something inside her whispered, there must be a life beyond this struggle. Every day, she tried to help her father, carrying baskets of yams, fetching firewood, and selling small things at the market. But money was never enough. Her father's cough had grown worse, his back bent with pain. Ada could see the worry in his eyes, the helplessness he tried to hide. One night, as she sat by the small fire, she took his frail hand in hers and whispered, Don't worry, Baba. I will find a way. I promise. That night, she decided she would leave the village and go to the city. The journey was long and frightening. Ada walked with only a small bundle of clothes, her heart pounding with both fear and hope. She had heard stories about the city, people getting rich overnight, opportunities hiding in every corner, but also danger lurking in shadows. I must be brave, she told herself. The first days were overwhelming. Streets crowded with strangers, noise she had never known, and tall buildings that touched the sky made her feel small, almost invisible. Yet she kept going. Every step was for her father, every drop of sweat a promise of survival. Finally, after days of searching, Ada found herself in front of a luxurious mansion. The gates gleamed in the sun, polished marble floors reflected the light, and servants moved swiftly about, attending to the endless needs of the wealthy family who lived inside. This was the place that would change her life. She had come looking for work, hoping to earn her living honestly. And when she knocked on the massive door, a polite but firm voice called her in. It was Madame Ruth, the lady of the house. She looked at Ada carefully, her eyes sharp, but something softened as she noticed Ada's humble, earnest expression. You are here for work? Madame Ruth asked, her voice calm but commanding. Ada nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am. I can work hard, ma'am. I promise I will not fail. Madame Ruth studied her for a moment, then gave a small nod. Very well. You may start tomorrow. But remember, you must obey the rules of this house. You must be diligent, respectful, and hardworking. Do you understand? Ada's heart leapt. Yes, ma'am. I will do my best. That night, as Ada lay on the mat in the small servant's room, she stared at the ceiling, her mind filled with both fear and hope. The mansion was beautiful, intimidating, and alive in a way her village had never been. But for the first time in her life, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she had a chance to change her destiny. She whispered a quiet prayer, Baba. I will not fail. I will survive. I will make a life for us. And with that, Ada closed her eyes, unaware that this house, this family, and the life waiting for her inside would soon bring both love and heartbreak she could never imagine. Ada's first day at the mansion was harder than she had imagined. The floor sparkled, the room smelled of perfume, and the chandeliers reflected the sunlight like tiny stars. It was beautiful, almost unreal, but Ada had no time to admire it. There were chores to do, meals to prepare, laundry to wash, and a household that expected perfection. She rolled up her sleeves, took a deep breath, and reminded herself, I am here to work. I must be strong. I must survive. From dawn till dusk, Ada moved tirelessly. She polished the floors until her arms ached. She scrubbed the marble sinks and counters until they gleamed. She cooked meals that smelled rich and heavy, even though her own stomach growled quietly in hunger. Every time she handed a tray to a servant or polished a piece of furniture, she whispered, "Do this well, do not fail." And she never did. Every task, no matter how small, she completed with diligence and care. Madame Ruth's son often watched her quietly from the halls. He did not interfere, but sometimes he would hand her a glass of water or quietly ask if she was feeling well. Ada never knew how to feel about him. He was gentle, polite, and kind, yet there was something distant in his eyes, something she could not read. She smiled politely, nodded, and kept to her work, her heart quietly aware of the warmth she felt whenever he looked at her. But she told herself firmly, "Focus on the chores. Do not be distracted. This is your work, nothing more." Days turned into weeks. Ada grew accustomed to the rhythm of the mansion. She learned the house rules quickly, when to sweep, when to polish, when to cook, and when to step back. Other staff began to notice her diligence. "She is too hardworking," whispered one maid. "Yes, but humble too," another replied. Ada worked quietly, smiling politely at small compliments, never letting pride or vanity touch her. Yet, in quiet moments, she felt a strange mix of longing and loneliness. The mansion was beautiful, the family respected her work, and yet, she missed her village, her father, and the simple life that now felt like a dream. By the end of the month, Ada was no longer just a maid, she was part of the household rhythm. The son sometimes walked beside her in the halls, helping with small chores, or silently watching her work. The staff admired her discipline and humility. But Ada kept her heart guarded, focused entirely on her work, unaware that in the quiet moments, a deeper story was beginning to write itself, one of love, secret bonds, and a life-changing event that would soon turn her world upside down. Life in the mansion was still hard, but Ada was starting to find small moments of peace. She woke every morning before the sun, her hands already sore from scrubbing floors and preparing breakfast. The boy sometimes followed her quietly, asking small questions about the animals in the garden or the birds in the courtyard. Ada smiled politely and answered, careful not to get distracted. "I must stay focused," she whispered to herself, even as her heart felt lighter in those small moments. She began to notice that not everything in the house was strict or cold. Madame Ruth sometimes left a warm bowl of food for her at the end of a long day, and the other staff would occasionally bring her small gifts, a bundle of fresh flowers, a tiny sweet cake. These gestures made Ada's heart ache with gratitude. She had never experienced kindness like this in her life. "Why are they so kind?" she thought one night as she lay on her mat, her body exhausted but her heart feeling strangely full. Even the young master began to show subtle signs of care. One evening, he handed her a small cup of tea and said softly, "I noticed you skipped lunch today. Please, take care of yourself." Ada's cheeks burned with warmth, but she only nodded, murmuring, "Thank you, sir. I will." She tried not to dwell on it, reminding herself that she was only a maid, and he was the son of a wealthy family. Yet, every time he smiled at her or checked if she was okay, her heart skipped, though she would never admit it to anyone, not even to herself. Despite the small joys, life still tested her. Heavy laundry, endless cleaning, and long hours left her muscles sore and her spirit weary. She faced occasional scolding from the head housekeeper for minor mistakes, and the boy sometimes spilled food or knocked over a vase, which earned her quiet sighs rather than anger. But in those moments, she learned patience and resilience. She laughed quietly to herself when the boy offered his apology, seeing the innocence in his eyes. And slowly, amidst the hardships and small joys, Ada began to feel a quiet strength inside her, a hope that maybe, just maybe, life could be kind if she kept working hard and stayed true to herself. Ada noticed the first signs quietly, almost afraid to admit them even to herself. Her mornings were heavier, her stomach sometimes ached, and the nausea made her pause mid-task. At first, she told herself it was the long hours and the hard work, but deep down, she felt something changing inside her. She tried to hide it, keeping her movements careful, her smile steady, and her voice calm. No one must notice. I must keep this a secret, she whispered to herself as she polished the marble floors, her hands trembling. Days turned into weeks, and hiding the truth became a daily challenge. Ada wore loose dresses, carried herself carefully, and avoided bending too fast or lifting heavy trays. The boy sometimes picked at her curiously, but she smiled softly and went on with her chores, careful never to let him see her struggle. Even the young master, who occasionally checked on her, never guessed. Ada felt a mixture of fear and hope, fear that someone would discover her secret, and hope that, somehow, this child might be a blessing despite the hardships. There were moments when the boy would run to her, asking for help with small tasks, or when he would laugh at her playful gestures. Ada smiled, but every laugh made her heart tighten. She imagined what it would be like to have a child of her own, to hold someone who belonged to her. Her thoughts always returned to the secret she carried and the tiny life growing quietly within her. Please, let this baby be safe, let me survive this, she prayed every night as she lay on her small mat, exhausted but determined. Then the day came when she could no longer hide it. A sudden, sharp pain struck her while carrying a tray of breakfast, making her gasp and stumble. The young master rushed to her side, eyes wide with worry. Ada. What's happening? He asked, panic in his voice. She clutched his hand weakly. I don't know, it hurt so much. Madam Ruth and the household doctor were called immediately, and Ada was rushed to the hospital in a flurry of voices and flashing lights. Hours passed in a blur of white walls, whispered conversations, and tense footsteps. Ada's heart thumped wildly, and the fear of losing her baby clawed at her chest. She wanted to see her child, to hold them, to know they were alive, but the doctors and Madam Ruth kept her at a distance. Finally, a nurse spoke softly, avoiding her gaze. Ada, there were complications. The baby did not survive. Her words stopped. The words hit her harder than any physical pain. She was not allowed to see the child, not allowed to hold them, not allowed to say goodbye. Ada left the hospital with a broken heart, carrying only grief and the bitter memory of what had been taken from her. The luxurious mansion, once a place of hope, now seemed cold and distant. She had worked hard, loved quietly, and endured silently, and yet, the one life she had hoped to protect had been stolen. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, "My baby, my little one. I will never forget you." Ada left the hospital with a heart heavier than any burden she had ever carried. The streets of the city were noisy and crowded, but none of it mattered. She could feel only the emptiness inside her. The baby she had waited for, dreamed about, and carried for months, was gone. She had no one to hold her, no one to tell her it would be okay. Her heart ached like it might break. At first, Ada had nowhere to go. She wandered the streets, searching for work, for food, for some kind of hope. She washed clothes for strangers, swept houses for a few coins, and sometimes sold small things at the market. Days passed, and some nights she went to bed hungry. Her body ached, her hands were sore, but she never gave up. Every day, she whispered to herself, "I must live. I must survive. I cannot give up. Baba is depending on me." Even while working hard, Ada could not forget her baby. Every time she saw a child laughing, playing, or being held by a parent, her chest tightened. She imagined her own child, wondering what he would look like if he had her eyes, her tiny fingers, or her smile. Her tears fell quietly at night, but she never let anyone see. She had learned to carry her pain silently, like a secret she could never share. Yet, even in sadness, she stayed strong, because she knew she had to survive. Years passed. Ada became strong in ways she never imagined. Her clothes were often tattered, her hands rough from work, and her body tired. But her spirit shone brighter than ever. She kept moving forward, never forgetting her lost child. The city remained harsh and cold, but Ada's hope never died. She dreamed that one day, maybe by fate or miracle, she might see her baby again. She did not know how or when, but deep inside, a quiet voice whispered, "Your story is not finished yet. Something is waiting for you." Years had passed since Ada left the city, heartbroken and alone. Life had been harsh, but it had also made her strong. Her hands were rough from work, her clothes worn, and her body tired, but her spirit remained unbroken. Every day she woke before the sun, thinking of her father, dreaming of a chance to make life better. One morning, she saw a notice pinned on the market board. Nanny needed for a large household. Immediate start. Good pay. Ada's heart skipped a beat. She had not thought about working in a mansion again, not after everything that had happened. But she needed the money. She needed stability. Without a second thought, she applied. When she was called for an interview the next day, she felt a mixture of fear and hope. "I must survive. I can do this," she whispered as she walked toward the mansion, the city streets buzzing with life around her. The mansion was even bigger than she remembered. Crystal chandeliers sparkled in the sunlight, polished floors reflected the walls like mirrors, and the scent of flowers filled the air. Servants moved quickly from room to room, attending to the endless needs of the household. Ada felt her heart race. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and reminded herself, "Focus. Work hard. Be diligent. This is a job, nothing else." She was introduced to the boy she would care for. He was small, curious, and full of energy. He ran through the halls, occasionally glancing back to see if she was watching. Ada's first instinct was to stay professional. She smiled politely, guided him gently when needed, and returned to her chores. She cleaned rooms, polished silver, cooked meals, and organized the child's things with the same care and attention she had always shown. Each day, she repeated her mantra silently: "Work well. Be diligent. Focus on the task. Nothing else matters." The boy laughed, played, and sometimes asked her questions about the world. Ada answered with kindness, but there was no special bond yet. She had learned to protect her heart, to keep herself from getting too close, and she kept her emotions tucked away behind her calm, obedient smile. The mansion was busy and alive, the family large and well-known, and Ada walked quietly, focusing on her responsibilities. She did not know that in the quiet corners of the house, fate had already begun weaving threads that would one day bring the past and present crashing together. Days and weeks passed in the mansion, and Ada grew used to her new life. She woke early, polished floors until they gleamed, prepared meals, and made sure the boy was safe and happy. She never let herself get distracted by his playful presence. To her, he was just a child in her care, nothing more. "I am here to work. That is all," she reminded herself every day. But slowly, small things began to catch her attention. The boy would sometimes watch her quietly as she moved through the halls, his little eyes following her every step. Sometimes, he left his toys neatly near her path, almost like he wanted to be noticed. Ada smiled politely at these gestures, thinking, "He's a clever child, just curious, nothing more." But deep inside, a strange feeling began to stir, a flutter she could not understand. One afternoon, while helping him tidy his room, the boy suddenly held out a drawing he had made. "For you," he said shyly. Ada took the paper and looked at it. It was a simple sketch of a mother and child, holding hands under a bright sun. Her heart skipped. She blinked, trying to convince herself it was nothing. "Children draw what they see, nothing more," she whispered, though her hands shook slightly. Other moments followed. The boy would laugh at her jokes before anyone else did. He would sometimes walk silently behind her, appearing wherever she was, almost as if he knew she would need him. He had a way of reaching for her hand when he fell or got scared, a quiet trust that felt unusual. Ada told herself firmly, "Focus. This is just a job. Don't get attached." Yet the moments kept piling up, little hints that seemed too familiar, too gentle, to ignore. And slowly, unknowingly, Ada's heart began to stir, though she did not yet understand why. Weeks had passed since Ada had started caring for the boy. She had grown used to his laughter, his small quirks, and his endless questions, but she never let herself feel too attached. After all, she reminded herself daily, "I am a nanny. That is all. Nothing more." Then one afternoon, as she helped him with his homework, something small caught her attention. The boy rolled up his sleeve to show a tiny scratch on his arm, but beneath it was a mark, a faint birthmark shaped like a tiny crescent. Ada froze. Her heart began to race. She had seen that mark before, long ago, in a hospital room filled with cold white walls, whispered conversations, and the soft cries of a newborn she was told she could never hold. Her hands shook slightly as she tried to look away, but her eyes kept returning to it. Over the next days, more moments seemed familiar. The boy laughed in ways that made her chest tighten. He reached for her hand instinctively when he was afraid, smiled at her in quiet moments, and sometimes looked at her with a curiosity she could not explain. Ada tried to push the feelings away, telling herself firmly, "This is impossible, just a coincidence, stay focused." But deep inside, something in her heart stirred, something she had thought buried forever. Finally, the truth could no longer be denied. One evening, as the boy ran to her after a small fall, she held him close, feeling a strange, overwhelming bond that went beyond care. Her tears fell silently, and her heart pounded with memories of the past, the hospital, the lies, the baby she thought she had lost. She whispered softly, almost in disbelief, "No, it cannot be, it's you, my baby, my own little one." Her hands trembled as she held him, the pieces of her past and present crashing together. The mansion, the family, the boy she had been caring for, everything suddenly made sense. The life she had thought was gone had been here all along, quietly waiting for her to see the truth. Ada could not sleep that night. Her mind kept returning to the boy, her boy, the child she had thought was lost forever. Every laugh, every tiny gesture, every curious glance made her heart ache with a strange mix of hope and fear. She knew deep inside, this child was hers, but how could it be? How could the universe play such a cruel and miraculous game? The next morning, Ada decided she could no longer wait. She had to know the truth, no matter the cost. She walked to Madame Ruth's office, her hands trembling, her chest tight. "Madame Ruth. I need to know the truth," she said quietly but firmly. Madame Ruth froze. For a moment, the silence was unbearable. Then the young master, who had been standing silently nearby, stepped forward, his face pale and eyes filled with a mix of guilt and regret. "Ada. I never wanted you to suffer," he whispered. I thought I was protecting you. But the truth is, the child, your child, he is alive." Ada's heart pounded so fast she felt she might collapse. She shook her head, unable to believe her ears. "No, it's impossible." "How?" she whispered. But before the young master could answer, the boy ran up to her, arms outstretched, a smile lighting up his face. Ada fell to her knees, tears streaming down her cheeks as she held him for the first time. "My baby, my little one, you're alive," she sobbed, hugging him tightly. The boy laughed, wrapping his small arms around her neck. Everything, her heartbreak, her loss, her years of struggle, was washed away in that moment. Madame Ruth watched silently, the weight of the past heavy in her eyes, while the young master stood beside Ada, silent, full of regret but also relief. For the first time in years, Ada felt whole. The mansion no longer felt cold or distant, it now held warmth, love, and the sound of a family reunited. She looked at the young master, her eyes still wet, and said softly, "You should have told me, but it doesn't matter now. He is here, he is alive." He nodded, tears in his eyes, knowing words could never undo the pain of the past. Ada held her son close, whispering a quiet prayer of gratitude. "Thank you, for keeping him safe, and for letting me find him again." Outside, the city carried on, unaware of the miracle inside the mansion. But for Ada, for her little boy, life had finally come full circle. She had survived heartbreak, poverty, and betrayal, and now, she had her greatest treasure back, her child, her love, and a future they would face together. If this story moved you, made you emotional, or made you think, please subscribe for more powerful stories like this. New stories every time, stories that teach, heal, and stay with you.